Hello. Let me explain the details of this PR. This PR is resolving to issue of building add update dialog, and the dialog looks like this. This is a dialog called add daily scrum update, and it has a title and description and the fields for taking the daily Scrum updates. It has a date field and the the questions for the daily Scrum updates are here. And by clicking the Add Update button at the bottom right corner, uh, the data is sent to the server and recorded on the database. Anyways, it was developed in the prototype, but I had to implement it on the daily Scrum application. So I'll introduce some important points of this PR. Okay, so the first one uh, is that I added a looks on. As you can see, it's a it's an npm module, and looks on is the module that allows to calculate times and dates, and it's developed by Moment.js organization. And I looked up other date and time calculation libraries, but I found that Luxon is better uh, in calculating time zones. So um, let's look into this link. Yeah. Okay, so here is one of the typical use case of the Luxon datetime object. It's actually the datetime object is from the Luxon package. It's imported as like this. The datetime is imported from Luxon, and by calling some methods, I could initialize the datetime instances. So, for example, in this code, by calling a now method of datetime, it returns a datetime instance object pointing to the current time. And with the set zone and passing a time zone that you want to set, it sets to the time zone. And with the start of method and passing a day string here, uh, the time the time converts to the starting time of the time's date. So for example, if I call now, it's March 12th and 4:13 p.m. And when I call the start of day, the time becomes midnight of March 12th. So it's March 12th, hour 0, minute 0, and second 0. Yeah. So that is recorded as a today variable here, and I'm using it to calculate the the time of tomorrow. So by just I could easily calculate it by calling a method called plus, and plus days is 1. So that means I add a 1 day to the today, and that becomes a tomorrow. So with those two values from today and calling to ISO date method, it returns a string, but the time is formatted as a ISO datetime format. So after this, I could use this string to display it on the form on the dialog. Okay, so this is why that's why I installed Luxon library. And the next thing is that I added a dialog component, which is a main feature of this PR. And actually, the dialog component is pretty long, and it was already developed in the prototype. And uh, there are many things are in the component, but most of them are how the form logic is implemented. It's all about the form logics. But let me introduce some key aspects. So the first one here, let's wait a second. Okay, the first key point of this component implementation is that the dialog component is opened up by looking into the search parameter of the URL. And if there is a parameter value as add scrum update with the key of dialog, uh, then the dialog is opened up. Let me show you how it works. So in the app, as you can see in the URL, there is no search parameter. But if I click the add update button, uh, in search parameter is added to the URL as a core string. And as you can see, dialog equals add scrum update. And the dialog component is looking into this search parameters. So that's why the dialog is pops up. Dialog is popped up. So I don't manage it. I don't manage the open state as a separate JavaScript state, but the state is managed on the as a URL. Okay. Next thing. Okay. So next thing is that it's a same dialog component, but there are a bunch of fields in the form, and I separated the date field into another component. It's the main reason why I did this is because that the date field needed to calculate some field values into other values. So, for example, the field value other than the field value, I had to calculate the tomorrow value and date formatting and so on. So I wanted to memorize those values into by using a use memo hook. So I just created a new component. So I could gather uh, I could gather the only uh, uh, I could gather the only related values to the date field. Mhm. And next thing is that I also created a separate component for the dialog component. So the dialog UI is written in the add scrum update dialog as we just seen, but there is a separate loader component, and this loader has one responsibility that which is to fetch a data from a database and pass the fetched data to the UI dialog. So the reason why I separated the loading functions from the UI dialog is because that the dialog function had to use client-side only features. So, but the database fetching logic is has to be done on the server side. So this loader component is a server component. So that's why I separated those two. But basically, with those two, it's dealing with the same same one component. It just has a different um, responsibilities. Okay, that's how those are the important things related to the dialogue. And next, I created a action function which is called add update, and this function is called when a user submits a form by clicking the add update button right here, this one. And this action is it takes data of the form and pass it to the database and inserts new entries and answers to the database. Yeah, that's the main role of this function. Mm, if uh, let's look into the details of the action a little bit. It takes this function takes some values. The first one is form ID and a time zone and a form values. The form values is the value that user has written on the form, and form ID is the the form that this entry is submitted to, and time zone is required to record that where how this entry date should be calculated. Okay, anyways, in the action, it takes a date from the form values and convert it into ISO formatted date string. And other than that, uh, it just takes out date. And first, it creates an entry in the data for the database. This create dailyscrum update entry function is a service function that I created, and it basically inserts data into the dailyscrum update entries table. It takes these values, and when it's called, it creates a new row in a database. It inserts a new row in a database and returns the newly created entry. Uh, if there is an error, error is going to be handled. And if there is no error and the entry is successfully passed out from the function, then the application creates answers from the form values that user written in, and it passes the entry ID that we just created here, and also the pass in the answer that user answered to and the question ID of each answer. Yeah, and it just inserts it to the database. And if there's no error, the operations are done. Okay, so this is how the action is working. And the action is called, the action is called when the form is submitted. So this part is where this part of code, this code is called when this form is submitted. It's a form submit handler. It takes all the form values and just pass in the necessary data to the add update action function. Okay, that's it for the submit action. And aside to the form-related logic, I fixed some configuration for the Vite. I'm using Vite config for the UI package, and oh, I fixed some configuration for the Vite config. As the UI package is built with Vite, and by using a Vite's library mode, it's basically using a rollup internally. So I uh, and I somehow I found out that the library was not properly including the directives in the source components. For example, there are use client directives in the UI components, but when it's built, the JavaScript file doesn't. Uh, uh, in the JavaScript file, the directive is omitted. It's not in there, so it's a problem because I had to use it in the server component in the Next.js. So I looked it up on the web, and not only me and lots of developers were experiencing it, and I found out there's a plugin called Rollup Plugin Preserve Directives, and this plugin um, allows Vite to include the directives in the source code. So I imported in the Vite config file as a preserve directives function, and I applied it into the vconfig's plugins array. So as you can see, there's a plugins and it's an array, and I only had to put the function in here. And if and to make sure this properly works, I had to also add these settings in the rollout options in the output. And in the output, the preserve modules property has to be true. So after doing this, uh, the output JavaScript file properly includes the use client directive properly. And beside that, I also made a change in here. The one problem was that uh, there's a file called usetoast ts in the chassis and UI component directory, and whenever the v is compiling into JavaScript, the build result looks like this. The .ts was not omitted. The v was already replacing the .tsx and remove the file extension, but it wasn't removing the ts extension. So I had to add this code to remove the .ts. So it's working fine right now. Okay, and yeah, those are all the important things for this PR. It was pretty long. And okay, that's it for now. Thanks for listening.